You may have heard of Nebula. It's the creator-owned streaming service offering content that is both thoughtful and entertaining. I've actually been a part of Nebula for quite some time now. That's actually why I started filming all of my videos in 4K. See, Nebula is all about taking creators to the next level of what they want to create. And some of my favorite creators from YouTube are also on Nebula. People like FD Signifier, Todd in the Shadows, Foreign Man in a Foreign Land, and Legal Eagle are all on Nebula creating high-quality content that lives on Nebula. And the best thing is that this content is completely free of ads, algorithms, or clickbait. And right now, I'm excited to announce that Nebula is gearing up to release a slew of original short films. One of them being Abigail Thorne's Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend. The film is about two former rivals who meet up over a drink to discuss their very, very toxic ex, Count Dracula. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it is a combination of Euphoria and Jennifer's Body, and that sounds very up my alley. Also, on June 25th, Nebula will be releasing Jesse Earle's film, Identities, which is actually starring Abigail Thorne, Maggie Mae Fish, and a few other Nebula creators. It's a sci-fi film about a pair of new hires who unravel their identities while navigating a corporate metaverse that controls every aspect of its employees' online reality. I can't wait to see these films, and it's been really fun seeing Nebula take on these creators and support their projects. For just under $3 a month, you can support independent creators just like me. And you can do that by going to nebula.tv/katblaque and getting a 40% off discount on an annual membership to Nebula. Or you can click the link in my description box below to check out Nebula today. What are you guys watching on Netflix right now? Because my boyfriend and I, we are trying to find something new to watch on Netflix. Recently, we've been watching Scavenger Reign. That was a really fun show. But my last favorite show that I've seen on Netflix has been Baby Reindeer. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It is a show about a man who is a comedian who is going through a really scary experience with a stalker. And it's about that, but it's also not really about that. I really like the show because it covers a lot of really rough topics that are not typically discussed. And I didn't know when I was first watching it that Richard Gadd, the star of the show, is also the person who wrote the show, and it's based on his real experiences. And a pretty big aspect of the show is his attraction to transgender women. Richard Gadd is openly bisexual, and I think that it's the first time I have ever seen a show that was produced and written by a man who is acknowledging his attraction to transgender women. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hi, my name is katblaque, and I like to think that I make diverse media commentary for introspective hot people. And if you're here, I'll assume that's you. And if you're brand new, you know exactly what to do if this video pleases you. Click my button, you know what I'm saying? Now, if you go over on my side channel, Movies in My Closet, I did film an entire review, episode by episode, where I also spoke quite a bit about the themes of the show. I watched it, I reflected upon the themes within it, and I think it's a pretty fun video, so go check that out. But in this video, we're going to be talking about a couple of other things that are connected to Baby Reindeer that I feel are worth exploring. There's some things that I personally have not seen. Baby Reindeer is a fascinating TV show, and it's something that I really identify with as a person who has been living with a stalker. Now, as a lot of people pointed out on my video over on Movies in My Closet, I was referring to the person who is stalking me as my stalker, and that is something that I shouldn't do. People who followed me on Twitter will remember the day that I received a bloody pad in the mail. Living with a stalker is pretty scary. It is not fun. And it was interesting watching the show because there's a lot about what he goes through that I definitely identify with because it's very similar to my own experiences. I talk about this in the Movies in My Closet video that I made about this, but I also have a stalker who believes that he is the only person who believes in me, the only person who is supporting me, and does not take no for an answer, who believes that he would be the best person for me, and it's very uncomfortable and very unnerving. And I really appreciate that the show really accurately shows these things, but I was pretty concerned when I discovered that his real stalker actually came out and was not too happy with the way that she was being portrayed. Now, in this video, I wanted to watch that interview with you guys and sort of give you my thoughts about it. I have avoided watching the interview because low-key, I think it's going to be kind of triggering. But I like to have, you know, these sort of experiences with you guys where I watch something for the very, 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 very first time. And so I figured that we would have the experience together. So I'm going to look it up online. I know Piers Morgan is, you know, what do they say in the UK? A bellend. You know, he's a bellend, you know? He's a cunt. I can't say that. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say those words. I'm sorry. I don't mean to curse at you.
That moment you realised it was you that they were depicting from what you were reading. The sleuths, as you say, had found your tweets. They compared some of the phraseology. They'd done the maths and they worked out this was you that was being depicted. How did that make you feel?
Absolutely horrendous.
In the course of your relationship with Richard Gadd, you send him 41,000 emails, 350 voice messages, 744 tweets, 48 Facebook messages, and 106 letters.
That's simply not true. If somebody was sending somebody 41,000 emails or something, they'd be doing how many a day? Lots.
Well, they'd be obsessively
yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What did you send him?
None of that's true. I don't think I sent him anything.
You never sent him anything?
No. I think there may have been a couple of emails exchanging, but that was it. Just jokey banter emails.
Netflix have said that these details are the real ones. That this is exactly
completely incorrect.
So you're denying sending anything to him?
There may have been a couple of emails.
Text messages?
Why are you sending him any?
Facebook messages?
No.
Did you tweet him?
I may have done years and years ago.
You actually tweeted him numerous times.
No, it wasn't numerous. It was about 18 tweets there or 14.
It's quite a lot for someone who's not that well known.
That's quite a lot.
But we were all friends. You know, it was banter.
Right, but it establishes you were contacted. That's in public.
Yes, I mean this.
Did you write some letters?
Public, no. I think when I saw the rape interview, that's actually incorrect. What I said
what is the rape
when I
interview?
saw that in the Guardian, I said, "What a shame! It's not your fault." Something like that.
You did write to him.
One later.
The fact that she sounds so much like the way that the actress portrayed her tells me that, like, she definitely left those voicemails, because there's no way in hell that the actress is just that good that she was that spot on.
Yeah, there he is. Mr. Two-timing slut. Don't trust him, guys. I'll promise you sex and sprint the other way.
I think he always wanted this to come out, to persecute someone, to take attention away from him and this rape allegation. And I just generally think he's got
rape allegation
problems.
I mean, there's no doubt he has problems. I mean, if you watch given that he's written it about himself, if you watch the whole thing as I did, all 5, 6 episodes, whatever it is, he has a lot of problems. He's quite open about that.
I'm sorry, but if I met someone in public, in passing, and they sent me 18 tweets, let's just leave it at that. That's you contacting me a lot. That's a lot to me. Because if we don't know each other, if we're not really close like that, if we're not really, you know, why are you contacting me so much? Right? I don't think that interview helped her at all. I think she definitely looked a little bit more like the actual stalker in this interview. So I don't know what she thought she was doing here. Somebody did leave a comment on the video over on the Movies in My Closet channel, referencing apparently something that happened with a trans woman who was auditioning for the show. So I wanted to look into that real quickly and sort of share my thoughts. Okay, so there's an article that I just found called Baby Reindeer star Richard Gadd questioned by producers over dating actress who auditioned for hit Netflix series. Richard Gadd, the creator of the star hit series Baby Reindeer, has faced questions about his professional conduct after dating a transgender actress who auditioned for his show. The actor was investigated and ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing by Baby Reindeer producer Clerkenwell Films after a romantic liaison in 2021 with Reese Lyons, who was interested in playing the role of Gadd's ex-girlfriend Terry in the stalker drama. Lyons went public with her experience on Twitter, now X, soon after Baby Reindeer premiered. She did not name Gadd or directly reference Baby Reindeer, but Deadline has verified his identity. Gadd declined to contact, while Lyons did not wish to comment beyond her X thread. So let's see what she said on X. All right, so first of all, Reese Lyons is really pretty, so shout out to her. I'm gonna read some of this. In light of recent conversations surrounding a newly released Netflix show, I have decided to come forward and share my experiences with this individual throughout the casting process. Please read the thread below for further context. The behavior you describe is very characteristic of somebody with borderline personality disorder, my therapist stated matter-of-factly. I can't make a formal diagnosis since I've never met him, but from what you said, he certainly seems to fit the criteria. I met him in the bar after one of my shows. He was with a friend. They both approached me after my performance to congratulate me, and that's when he offered to buy me a drink. But before I could respond with my usual no thanks to the offer of a drink from a man I did not yet know, I recognized him. He had followed me on Instagram a month prior, at the very beginning of the run, and that's when I realized that this wasn't a chance encounter, but he was specifically here to speak with me. Sure, I replied. We split off from his friend, and he began to tell me about his upcoming Netflix show that he had written. The role in question was that of his ex-girlfriend, a trans woman. I didn't treat her the best, he said. I wondered what that meant. I told him that I was interested in auditioning and asked him to get in touch with my agent at the time. But there's one other thing, he said. What? I replied. I find you really attractive. Back up, sir. Back up. But you want me to audition to play your ex-girlfriend who you mistreated and date you at the same time, I thought? Not knowing that this lack of sense of boundaries would soon become one of the first of many signs that I was dealing with someone who potentially exhibited cluster B personality traits, in which there are 9 diagnostic criteria. The following day, I decided to read the play that the series is based on. I found myself awestruck, yet simultaneously horrified. I was amazed by the bravery and candidness in which he spoke about the varying degrees of trauma that he had been through in his life. Yet I also couldn't help but notice how in all of these situations, he was the common denominator. But what I found particularly troubling were the ways in which he spoke about how he mistreated his trans ex-girlfriend, hiding her in secrecy, the ways in which internalized transphobia and shame could coexist with desire. Will he treat me like that, I thought. The next week, he asked me out on a date, and I said yes. I was mindful of the overlap between the upcoming audition and the romantic invitation, but I knew I needed to ask him more questions. I think you have a tendency to fetishize trans women, I said tentatively. Suddenly, I was met with an intense, emotionally dysregulated reaction. He was highly defensive and dismissive towards any observations I had to share with him. I have had this conversation many times. I've had this conversation so many times. Where is a person who spoke so bravely and candidly about his own psyche and his work? I thought to myself. We left the date, and a week later I texted him to end things prematurely. I said that I didn't think the conflation of the upcoming audition and dating each other at the same time was wise, and he said that he understood. But 2 weeks later, he spontaneously called me and said that he wanted to try dating again. I felt conflicted. I had set clear boundaries, and at the time, it appeared that he understood them. What if I say no, I asked myself. Does that mean that he would feel slighted and I wouldn't get a chance to audition? I decided to say yes, and quickly found myself pulled back into his emotional chaos again. It astounded me how somebody who spoke so openly and poignantly within the context of his career about how a power dynamic with an older and more well-established writer could quickly lead to an abuse of power and the devastating effects that this had on him, could then, in turn, become the very same person who recreated a strikingly similar power dynamic with me years later, where I found myself 10 years his junior, now auditioning for his show. Your audition was exceptional, he said as he consoled me over the phone. But it's out of my hand. Netflix is looking for somebody who's already a star. But what about us, I asked him. It's not going to work. You're too confrontational for me. Ooh, this is triggering. Look, I've had this conversation with men so many times where you very accurately usually point out that you're a fetishizer. You are a chaser, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And you know what's so funny to me, when I talk about this in my video on my side channel, but a lot of times when men approach transgender women, men like this approach transgender women, they have this like fanciful view of them. And a lot of them will approach trans women because in their mind, they view transgender women as more brave and more courageous than them. And they sort of enjoy being around the vibe and the energy that is put off when you are a person who embraces yourself, right? And so in a lot of ways, they're kind of like energy vampires. They will profess all of this love to you. They will celebrate you for being as open as you are, but they're really not interested in being that in their own lives. They're just sort of feeding off of you. Now, obviously, that's not exactly Richard Gadd's case. He's an openly bisexual man who just made a Netflix series where he very openly speaks about his attraction to transgender women. However, it is pretty common when people particularly fixate on somebody for being transgender that they're not quite engaging directly with them. And that's something I actually talk about in the video. Like, there's this weird way in which I've interacted with men who are like, they have this vision of me that isn't quite me, right? They project all of these qualities onto me by virtue of me being transgender. And I'm supposed to feel flattered by their particular fixation on these qualities that I have. And it really does, at a certain point, get frustrating because you can tell that they're not really interested in engaging with you. They are engaging with their idea, their conception of who you are. And that conception is often based on fetishes that they may have or an assumption about your confidence level by virtue of you being transgender, right? Like, I haven't always been confident, but there's a type of man who fetishizes transgender women, who sees the very nature of a transgender woman as inherently confident. And yeah, it takes audacity to be a trans person in a society that doesn't make a lot of space for trans people, right? But at the same point, it's also true that a lot of times someone is just transgender, right? And just because they're trans doesn't mean they have all of these qualities that you project onto them. And it is really hard to date somebody who's kind of dating like a version of you, but not quite dating you. Anyway, I want to clarify that I was not a victim of any type of abuse. I do not think a label such as abuse should be a prerequisite for people coming forward and sharing their experiences. If anything, it was the absence of such label that further prevented me from ever feeling able to speak out publicly about my experiences with him. After being on the receiving end of his refusal to accept any responsibility for what had happened and subsequent attempts to gaslight me, I almost began to gaslight myself in the process. I told myself that what I had gone through paled in comparison to what other people said they had been subjected to via online cluster B personality discourse, many of which included stories of unhappy marriages, restraining orders, and even contemplations of suicide. Yet the more I began to engage with this type of content, the more vindicated I felt. Finally, I had the language to articulate all of the emotional chaos I had encountered with him. My vocabulary soon expanded, and suddenly I found myself using phrases like idealization, devaluation, and discard, all terms that describe the hallmark characteristic cycle of attempting to form a romantic relationship with somebody who exhibits cluster B personality traits. So this is really long. There's a lot here. I will link it again, like the interview, in the comment box below. You guys can read it for yourself. But yeah, it does not surprise me. None of this really surprises me, you know? And unfortunately, that is kind of par for the course, right? A lot of people who go through a type of grooming like that will later in their lives do the same exact thing. And, you know, it makes me really sad because that's just a cycle that repeats and repeats and repeats. Even in Baby Reindeer, it's sort of insinuated at the very end that Martha went through some type of childhood abuse, right? And it doesn't surprise me that Richard Gadd would sort of do something like this, very clearly using his power as a person producing something for Netflix in order to potentially get a transgender woman into his bed, right? Like, it's very, very par for the course. None of this really surprises me. And it's kind of unfortunate because I really did enjoy Baby Reindeer. I thought that it was a really good show, but I will say that this kind of sours it for me a little bit. But anyway, I wanted to just make a video sort of talking about some of the things that I didn't talk about on my side channel. I explored the entire show. If you guys are interested in hearing my full and complete thoughts, you can check that out over on my side channel. I also have video notes that I did for Baby Reindeer that are just really raw notes on my phone that I recorded that's uploaded onto my Patreon if you guys are curious about that. And yeah, if you guys have not subscribed to my Movies in My Closet channel, please do. We are really trying to build it up over there. I would love to get to a point where I'm just posting content over there about film and television shows. So if you are at all interested in that, my thoughts about film and television shows that usually talk about alternative lifestyle, etc., 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 please go over there and check all of that out. Anyway, on that note, I will talk to you guys later. And as per usual, I want you to always remember and never forget that you are beautiful and you are loved. Bye.